Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to basically create a portfolio website using just a JSON file. Like I've done other iterations of how to create portfolio websites using Gatsby, using Google Sheets, using all sorts of things. This time we're going to use a JSON file just to basically organize our data. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder for the page. So we'll just call this the portfolio page folder. I'm just going to quickly just set up all my folders. Okay, so in here I'm going to set up a folder for CSS. I'm going to set up a folder in here for JavaScript, JS. We're going to set up a folder in here for images, if we have any pictures that we want to use on the website, and a new folder for JSON files. Okay, in my CSS file, I'll create a styles.css. And my JavaScript file folder, I'll create a app.js. And in my JSON file, I will create a new file, and we'll call it projects.json. Okay. Cool. Now, first step is we just want to set up our data. Okay, so let me just first get this little pop-up out of the way. Okay. Now, JSON is a syntax that looks a lot like a JavaScript object. So I can write an array of objects, an object with arrays in it. Essentially, if you can draw it as a data structure in JavaScript, you can draw it as JSON. So in this case, what I want to do is do an array of projects, the data for different projects. Okay, I'm just going to make up some dummy projects. But generally the idea is you would want to have a title of the project, and in JSON the keys have to be strings with quotations. So the title, we'll just call it project 1. Description. And then here I'll just do some like lorem. Let me do some lorem. What if I do this? Nope, it's not an HTML file. So what I will do is I'm going to open up a browser. Okay. And let's go find us some lorem ipsum. Actually, I think I remember hearing about a hipster ipsum. Let's use that. Hipster ipsum. Okay. 2 paragraphs is fine. And start with sure. Put a third. Yeah, that's fine with me. Actually, I'll just use the first paragraph. And there we go. So there's a description, comma. Then we want to have like an image. And this will just be some URL. Okay, images.google.com. We'll just look up something generic. Software screenshot. Okay, so we'll just use this generic screenshot here. Copy image address. And then we want a GitHub link, which I'll just put a link to my generic GitHub for now. http://www.github.com. Sorry for the sirens. I live in Brooklyn for a few more days. GitHub.com. Alex Merced Coder, comma, then a live link that would be to the live website. Right now, I'll just link to my portfolio just because this is just a quick demo. Okay, so essentially these would be like the 5 pieces of information you want. So I'm just going to copy this object. Actually, put a comma after it. Okay. And it's, oops, C is Control Z. Right, no, I think that was actually fine. Did I copy the? Looks like I copied the closing bracket too. So try that again. There we go. For projects, get rid of the trailing comma. There we go. We'll say this is project 4, project 3, project 2. I can then like customize it later if I want to do actual projects. But there we go. Now I have my data set. Wonderful. Now let's create a index.html file in this portfolio folder. Index.html. Okay, I'm going to use Emmet to generate my HTML boilerplate. Let's link everything together. I'm also going to use jQuery, so we're going to head over to code.jquery.com. I'll pull up the latest version, 3.6, and get the minified version. Grab the script tag, and then I'm going to put that right in there. I'm also going to want let's see here. Let's put the JavaScript file first. Script tag, so script source, and that's going to be .js/app.js. That's the file I want to use, and I'm going to use the defer keyword because I'm going to be doing some DOM stuff in there. Then I want a link tag, CSS, and that's going to be styles.css. And there we go. I should be all set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this file in the browser using Live Server. Open with Live Server. And I'm just going to quickly open up my DevTools. And first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that all my files are being brought in. So there's my JS file that's being brought in, so that's attached. I don't see the CSS file. And then I go here to jQuery, I see jQuery. So jQuery and my JS file are being brought in, but not my CSS file. And I think I know why, because it's not styles.h, it's /CSS/styles.css. Okay, cool. Now let's see if they're refreshed. Do I see it there? Now I see it there. See, there's my CSS file. Okay, cool. So generally what we're going to do is we're going to have, I like to always make sure I use my semantic tag. So we're going to have a header, all the stuff at the top of the page. So we're going to have a header. And then below the header, we're going to have our main tag where we're going to put all our main content. And then below that, we're going to have a footer tag where we're going to have all our footer content. So I always just like to think of it as like doing it section by section. Okay. And in my header, what I want is going to be a div. Actually, not a div. Let's do a h1 for a title. And then a nav tag for the navigation bar. Okay. So just say this is Alex's portfolio. And in the nav bar, I'm going to create a bunch of divs with the class of, let's see here, how do I want to do this? So I want to use Emmet so I can make this easy. What I want are divs with the class of link. And inside those divs, actually no, the way I want to do it is I want to do them as a tag. So I just want to do an a tag. And in each a tag, there is a div with the class of link. And I want, let's say, 4 of those, so times 4. So if I do this, and there we go. Okay. Oh, I see what I did there. Nope. Let's try that again. Might just have to do it this way. A with a div link. I wonder if I do this. If I do this, put a parentheses around it. Not sure if this is valid. Emmet times 5. Let's try that. Actually, times 4. Yes, there we go. So it's an a tag with a div, a tag with a div, a tag with a div, a tag with a div. It's just easier than writing it all out individually. And this would just be like link to home, back to the main page. This would be LinkedIn. GitHub. And to, let's say, the dev.to blog. which I highly recommend doing, blogging regularly at dev.to. Okay, cool. Let's just see how that's looking right now. So right now, I see all those links are just okay. Now, by default, a bunch of divs are going to stack on top of each other. I don't want them to stack on top of each other. I want them to be in a row like a navigation bar. Okay, so that would be this nav tag. So I'm going to head over to my CSS. Okay, and I'm going to just do a couple things first. First, I just want to do sort of my generic sort of all-around styling. So I'm just going to do stuff like zero out all the margin for everything. 0. Just like a quick reset. Padding for everything should be 0. And box sizing, I want it to be border box because it just makes it easier to kind of do math. Because then I'm not having to do this math of like, hey, the width is 500, but plus the width, plus the margin, plus the border. I can just, it's just going to be inclusive of those things, which makes it a little bit easier to do the math. That's what that does. Okay, so I just always do that just as a kind of a starting place. Usually I'd also set up some fonts and some variables. I'm not going to do much in the way of coloring here. I'm going to let you focus on how you want to design your portfolio. This is just going to be some basic placement. So in that case, I want to style my nav tag, because my nav tag is what contains these links. And actually, now that I think about it, let's do this. So that way we can see them side by side. Oops. There we go. So I'm going to say my nav, we're going to make that no longer just a block that has a bunch of blocks inside of it. We're going to have it be a flex box with a bunch of blocks inside of it, which then puts them all into a row. But you see, like, they're all nestled up against each other, which is not what I want either. So I'm going to use justify content to kind of see how they align, and I'm going to do a space around. And see that evenly spaces them within that row. Now what I want to do is style the divs. Okay, I like to be very specific, so I want to style the divs that are a child of a nav that have a class of link. Okay, so that way I know I'm specifically styling those things and nothing else. So in that case, what I'm going to do here is I want some spacing around here, margin. Let's give it like 10 pixels. There we go. Let's give it a border to kind of distinguish it from the title. So we'll say it's like 3 pixels, solid red. Nope, that's on the div. So let's do this. Let's move that over to the nav. I want the nav to have a border. The container to have a border, not the individual elements in the container. There we go. Nice. Okay. Get rid of this extra. Okay, let's make the font size a little bit bigger. Font size, we'll say 1.2 EMs, 125% of like the average size. And let's text transform. Let's make these all the letters uppercase. Uppercase. See, now they're all uppercase. And I want the font color not to be like the normal link color, so we'll do font color. Let's do this. Font color white, but the background color black. Okay, nice. Not the prettiest thing in the world, but again, that's not the point right now. And I'd like to give it like a little bit of a transition, because see, right now if I hovered over it, yeah, I get the little pointer thing there, but like I'd like it to be a little bit more obvious. You can click on it. So what I'm gonna do is do a transition. This means when these certain things change, you can like stipulate an animation on its changing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say, hey, whenever the color changes, give it a 0.2 second just make it a 0.3 second transition. And then also when the background color changes, let's give that a 0.3 second. 0.3 second transition as well. Cool. So right now you don't see anything yet because we need to create a situation where that would change. So let's just say nav div.link. When that is hovered over, we're just gonna do the opposite. So we'll say background color is white and color is black. Okay, so now when I hover over these, there's a bit of a transition. Less than a second, because it's 0.3 seconds, but it's a nice little transition. Makes it a little bit obvious that I'm like selecting something. Gives it a nice little effect. Cool. Nice. Okay, so now I'll go back to my index.html. My navigation bar is all set. Now let's go to my main content. Now let's say in my main content we decide that we want to have a hero, like a hero div. So we'll have a div with a class of hero. And we will have a div that represents my projects. So div.projects. Okay. And I'll leave that div alone. We'll come back to that in the JavaScript. But let's do the hero image real quick. And then in there we'll just say inside that div there's an h1 that just says Alex Merced. The dev. Okay. So let's do first things first. App CSS. So we now have a div that has a class of hero. So let's style it. And I want it to have a height of 500, or else it's not going to really have the effect that I want. So right now you don't see it, but it has a height of 500. We're going to give it a background picture. So let's look up background images.google.com. Textured brown background. This works for me. So I'll just copy the image address. And then we're going to say background image URL. And we'll put the URL in there. Okay, let's see if that gives us the effect that we want. Now see, like that doesn't quite fill it up the way I'd like. Okay, so we're going to then have to do sort of a background image or background. I always forget which is the exact one I'm looking for. Background, I think it's position. No, not position. Background. Repeat? Nope, no repeat. Not what I want though. Background. Position, size. Cover, that's what I want, cover. Okay, does that fill it up? Yeah, so see how that fills up the space? Although it'll still be still till I get that little Shutterstock piece there at the bottom, but I'll let that go. Let's see what happens if I make this 400. Did I cut that out? Yeah, there we go. Cool, so now we have that h1 in the dot hero. So dot hero h1, so we're going to style that h1. And I want the color of that h1 to be white. So that way it has some contrast. That's better. Now I want to position it. So we're going to say position, I want it to be relative. So that way it's relative. See, if I say absolute, it's based on this point right here, like the very point of the screen. If I say relative, it's relative to the top, this point of the container. Okay, the container that it's in. So now I can do something like this. I can be like top. I want it to be like 30% from the top. And see, that moves it down. And then we'll say from the left, I want it to be 40% from the left. And see, it positions it like, again, just to show you like how you would do like sort of that hero image type stuff. So you'd have the picture and then you just style text on top of it using position relative or position absolute. So that's cool. Now let's build out the projects. Okay. And let me actually center that title. Because I don't know. Well, I guess that's fine. Leaving it there left aligned. Okay. So let's see here. Next, let's go to our app.js. I'm going to be using jQuery, which we already have set up. So what I want to do is first grab is that div, which would be called projects. So I'm going to say const projects. equals, use the $sign for jQuery. Okay, and then say I want the thing that has a class of projects. Good. That should store that in that div. And then what I want to do is make a request for the data in my data.json. For that, we're just going to use a normal AJAX call. So you could use fetch, you could use Axios, but since I got jQuery, I'm going to use the built-in jQuery method, which is called AJAX. So $.ajax, and I'm going to call, since this file is in my files, I can use a relative URL, so I can just do or relative file path. So I can just say dot slash JSON slash, actually, how do I want to do that? Yeah, let's try, because technically relative to where this file is would be dot slash JSON slash projects.json. So let's make a request for that. We'll see if the request is successful in just a moment. Okay, now that request is going to return a promise, which I can then specify what I want to happen when that promise is done using a .then. The .then receives a function. That function is going to receive the data or the response from the request. So let's just console.log the data to see if we got it. I'm going to head over to console. And no, it's not finding it. Let's see how the URL looks like. JSON slash project. But shouldn't be looking there. So let's see if I do this. Does that fix it? Yep, there we go. Okay, so even though this JavaScript file is inside the JS folder, it is doing it relative to the index.html. Okay, good to know. So that means I would do ./JSON/projects because it's relative to the index.html file. Because that is what is executing, and that's the execution context of the website. Okay, cool. So we got that. Now the data, as we can see here, if we look over here in my console log, I can see that my data is really just an array of 4 items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop over those items. So data.for each, and then each of those items in that array is a project. So we'll just say project. Okay, so every time this for each loops, this variable equals that project. So it's the first project and the second project. And for each project, what I want to do is create a new div. Okay, so we're going to create a new, so we'll say const div equals a new div with the class of project. So it's a singular project. And this should be a string anyways. Okay, so div with the class of project. I had to use single quotes since I'm in double quotes. Okay. There we go. So that would be that tag. So that's going to create this element and save it in this variable. And then what I want to do is basically set that div's HTML, div.html, something I can do in jQuery. And in each one, what I want to do is have an H, just actually make it an H3. An H3 with that project title. So we'll use interpolation, string literals in JavaScript. Then we'll say we know that we have this project variable because that equals the current project. So I can say and then we know each project from our JSON file has these properties, title, description, etc. because we made the data. And we pulled the data from our projects.json file. So we know what our data looks like. So I can be like project.title. And then after the title, we want a paragraph tag. That's going to hold the project.description. Okay, and we should already see this kind of happening. Actually, you can't see it because I haven't mounted it anywhere yet. And I'll leave it at that for now. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is take the projects, because again that represents that div that has the class of projects, and I want to append to it the div that we just created. So now we should see it on the screen. So there we go. See project 1, project 2, project 3, project 4. Because see that for each loop is just we're requesting the data. The data comes in, then we loop over the data and generate this HTML for each project. Cool. And that's pretty much all I really need there, because again, if I were to take a look at my elements, I can see here, if I go to main, see there's that div that's called projects. That was the div we selected over here. And then in there, we generated several divs, each with a class of project, which I can then use for styling. So now if I were to go back and clean that up a little bit, I can go over here and say, hey, let's style the divs that have a class of project. And let's give them a width of 80%. But those are not centered. So let's center that a little bit. So we're going to use margin auto to center those divs. Centered. Okay, cool. That's looking better. Now I want to target the H1s or the H3s inside there. So I'm going to say project dot project, because that's the class of the container for each individual project. And inside of each of those divs, there's an H3 for the title. That's what I want to style. Okay, and we're going to say give that a margin of 5 pixels. I'm going to give it a background color of green and a color of white. And see, like those now all have those characteristics. Then I want to style a paragraph. And we're going to say, actually I'll leave the paragraph as is. There's not really much to do there. Okay, and you can see, like, again, this is all very ugly, but you get the idea. But the cool thing going forward, and then I can go back and add a footer and all that stuff. But the basic idea is to see, like, one, my HTML is pretty organized. Like, if I need to edit the top of the code stuff, the header, these 2 rows, I'll go through my header tag and I can explore that. And the main body would be inside the main tag, and then any footer I make would be in the footer. And I know the hero is in a separate div than my project. So by organizing the sections of my pages very deliberately in my HTML, it made it really easy for me to style and really easy for me to grab the particular sections I need from in my JavaScript to dynamically add additional data. Okay, and then again, in the future, I can just add another project by going here. All I have to do is go in here and add another project. I don't have to like edit the website. I just go whoop, Control C, tab. I made, let's say, a new project. I hit that, change this to project 5. And if I go here, now there's a project 5. And that's the beauty of like writing dynamic code. You don't have to necessarily do as much coding after the fact. You may do a little bit more coding up front to set up all the dynamicness, like to set up the fact that this pulls the data from the JSON file and loops over it. But once you have it set up, you can just add as much data as you want in that JSON file, and your website will just update. Okay, and then again, I can go add the links into these sections. I, style it better. But again, this was just a quick dry run. But yeah, so that's how you would build at least the beginning of a portfolio website using just raw HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is a good way to do your portfolio site. It's going to be faster and better for search engine optimization. Especially since portfolio websites don't need to do too much. They're very basic. They're just there. They're just your calling card. So they don't necessarily need for you to go all out and bring in React, Vue, Angular, or use a static site generator like Gatsby. Although if you are going to use React, I would recommend using a static site generator for your portfolio. Meaning, if you're using React, use Gatsby. If you're using Vue, use Gridsum. If you're using Svelte, use SvelteKit. If you're using Angular, use Scully, because you're going to end up getting a better end result, speed, and search engine optimization wise using those than just using the framework itself. So with that, I'll end this video, but hopefully this is something you'll use on your next portfolio, or think about how you can use JSON files in your projects. See you later.